Esther. We're going to start studying through this book, the book of Esther. It is a very unusual book. It's one of only two books in the scripture that are named for a woman, Ruth being the other. But that's not really its uniqueness. The mark of uniqueness about the book of Esther is there is absolutely no mention of God in this book. His name is not there. There is no mention of prayer in this book. Though the children of Israel are enduring and facing a very difficult situation in this book, there is no prayer mentioned here. However, we see God's providence throughout the book, and we see his protection of his people, even when they are not calling his name, even when they are not looking for him. We see his provision and his protection of his people in this book. And so it's very unique book. And we begin here in chapter 1. This book is timed to be congruent with the 5th chapter of Ezra. The building begins again on the house of God there in the book of Ezra. Ezra and his crew went back to rebuild the temple after their 70-year separation from the land. And it's at this time that it begins Esther's story here. It is those in Israel that had went back from Cyrus's command are there building the temple, and God and the provision of the Lord is the talk of the town in Jerusalem. But in Persia, where Esther takes place, he's not mentioned at all. And so it's an interesting contrast of what's going on in Israel at this point and what's happening here in Persia, where the rest of the children of Israel are still at in this time of captivity. Even though I should say the captivity was over in that sense, but they're still there. They didn't go anywhere. They remain there at this point. In fact, when Cyrus had told them they could go, only 50,000 had left to this point. The rest were comfortable there with their lives in Persia, in the somewhat captivity of their existence there. But we see, nonetheless, without God's name being mentioned, without prayer even being mentioned, we see God clearly working in the lives of his people on their behalf in the midst of this trouble. We're dealing here with a pagan king and a pagan kingdom. And we again see God's providence here for his people. No matter where they may be found, he is ever watching over us and protecting us. Now, we read here beginning in verse 1, it says, "Now it came to pass in the days of Ahasuerus." This is Ahasuerus, which reigned from India even unto Ethiopia, over 127 provinces. That in those days, when the king Ahasuerus sat on the throne of his kingdom, which was in Shushan the palace, in the 3rd year of his reign, he made a feast unto all his princes and his servants, the power of Persia and Media, the nobles and princes of the provinces being before him. When he showed the riches of his glorious kingdom and the honor of his excellent majesty many days, even 180 days. And that's a party, 180 days long. And he's having a big shindig there to show off 180 days. And when these days were expired, the king made a feast unto all the people that were present in Shushan the palace, both unto great and small, 7 days, in the court of the garden of the king's palace, where were white, green, and blue hangings, fastened with cords of fine linen, and purple, the silver rings, and pillars of marble. The beds were of gold and silver upon a pavement of red and blue and white and black marble. And they gave them drink in vessels of gold, the vessels being diverse one from another, and royal wine in abundance according to the state of the king. And the drinking was according to the law, none did compel, for so the king had appointed to all the officers of his house that they should do according to every man's pleasure. Also Vashti, the queen, made a feast for the women in the royal house which belonged to King Ahasuerus. On the 7th day, when the heart of the king was merry with wine, he commanded Mehuman, Biztha, Harbona, Bigtha, Abagtha, Zethar, and Carcass, the 7 chamberlains that served in the presence of Ahasuerus the king, to bring Vashti the queen before the king with the crown royal, to show the people and the princes her beauty, for she was fair to look on. But the queen Vashti refused to come in at the king's commandment by his chamberlains. Therefore was the king very wroth, and his anger burned in him. So this is during the reign, of course, of Ahasuerus. He is, that term means high father or venerable king. It is a title. It's not his actual name. It's simply a title for the king. Most believe this to be Xerxes the Great of Persia, but it doesn't really match the common understanding of the timeline. Others say it is Cyrus, which that may not be exactly right either, even though that would be close to the same time, who sent the children of Israel home. Um, uh, some even have determined that Cyrus was the son of, which that don't make sense to me, but some have said that Cyrus was the son of Ahasuerus and Esther, which that would be interesting if that's the case. But that the timeline there doesn't make sense either. So I don't understand where they get that from. I've not seen enough of the evidence of it, but nevertheless, this is the king of Persia at this time, or the world empire at this time, and he's reigning over 127 provinces that he has power over, basically the known world at this time. And it tells us that he sat on the throne in his kingdom there, Shushan. In the 3rd year of his reign, he made this feast. And this banquet itself probably consisted of well over 1,000 people. You had the delegates from each of the provinces, the 127 provinces. And it was the one banquet to end all banquets, and 180 days this went on. That's a bigger buffet than Golden Corral's got there. I mean, that's a feast and a half there. 180 days of this feasting. The cost alone would have been millions upon millions to create such a thing, with all the trappings, the decorations, the gold that they had, gold couches that they were sitting on, and silver couches. They're drinking from gold goblets. All of this food that's prepared here is just the pomp of luxury of this kingdom that Ahasuerus has been given, and it shows uh, his need even to show off, to show this greatness of his empire. Again, from the outside, it appears that God is left out of this story. But we see, as the scriptures reveal, we see he is very much in control throughout this story that's given us concerning Esther. Now, she's not mentioned here in the first chapter. The one who the book bears her name is the title. She's not made mention here, but here is mentioned Ahasuerus and his wife, the queen Vashti. She is made mention of here. And of the last 7 days, there it tells us in verse 5, the last 7 days, all of not just the 127 delegates from the provinces of the empire, but all of the city of Shushan is invited to this 7-day feast. Last 7 days, the whole city, small and great, whoever lives in the city can come to this last 7 days of the feast and partake of the riches of the kingdom. And verse 6, it tells us the ritziness, if you will, of the room and of the place where they are meeting, and how the palace was dressed up there, where it says where were white, green, blue hangings fastened with cords of fine linen, purple to silver rings and pillars of marble. The beds were of gold and silver upon a pavement of red and blue and white and black marble. It was an opulent display there of the wealth of Persia. And they gave them drink, it says in verse 7, of vessels of gold. And each one of those made different one from another. It wasn't a mass production of those, but they were individual pieces made, individual cups made out of that gold, and each one was different. And royal wine in abundance, according to the state of the king. Drinking was according to the law, none did compel, for so the king had appointed all the officers of his house that they should do according to every man's pleasure. So they were drinking to their fill. There was not just a cup given to them. All they wanted, they could have. And Vashti, at the same time this is going on, Vashti the queen has made a feast for the women in the royal house. He's having a party, and she's having a tea party, I guess, is what she's having. She's probably something more sophisticated than what was going on in the main palace. And she has this feast for the women of the court. And it tells us here in verse 10, and on the 7th day, when the heart of the king was merry with wine, he commanded his chamberlains here to go get Vashti and bring her in her royal attire, and show her off for the rest of the kingdom. Said she was a very pretty woman, and so he wanted her brought in there to show her off. In his drunkenness is the state that he's in. He commands her to be brought in and displayed. That in itself very ungentlemanly, to say the least, but here he is demanding his wife come and display herself. But the queen refused. She had a little more dignity than the king did, apparently, at least in this instance. She refused to come to the king's commandment by his chamberlains. And Ahasuerus becomes very angry at this. It says his anger burned in him. Then the king said to the wise men which knew the times, for so was the king's manner toward all that knew law and judgment. And the next unto him was Carshena, Shethar, Admatha, Tarshish, Meres, Marsena, and Mamukin, the 7 princes of Persia and Media, which saw the king's face, and which sat at the first in the kingdom. These are his 7 closest advisors, and he goes to them in his anger, and goes to them in his wrath, and wants their opinion on what he should do to his wife for disobeying him so openly. What shall we do unto the queen Vashti according to the law? Because she hath not performed the commandment of the king Ahasuerus by the chamberlains. And Memucan answered before the king and the princes, Vashti, the queen, had not done wrong to the king only, but also to all the princes. Well, he's because she disobeyed the king. Well, she's disobeyed the whole kingdom. That's what his viewpoint was. But also to all the princes and to all the people that are in all the provinces of the king Ahasuerus. For this deed of the queen shall come abroad unto all women, so that they shall despise their husbands in their eyes when it shall be reported. The king Ahasuerus commanded Vashti the queen to be brought in before him, but she came not. He was afraid that a women's liberation movement was going to break out in the kingdom if he did not bring punishment. These women are going to go crazy when they find out Vashti disobeyed you and you did nothing about it. We're going to have to be stiff. We're going to have to be really strong in our judgment here. Likewise, verse 18, likewise shall the ladies of Persia and Media say this day unto all the king's princes which have heard of the deed of the queen, thus shall there arise too much contempt and wrath. They were afraid that they were going to be in trouble when they got home if something was not done with Vashti's disobedience to the king. If it please the king, he says in verse 19, let there go a royal commandment from him, and let it be written among the laws of the Medes and the Persians and the Medes, rather, that it be not altered. Vashti come no more before King Ahasuerus, and let the king give her royal estate unto another that is better than she. Now, Vashti here is being treated awfully. Said she had more scruples about her, it seems, than the king did, and her refusal to come and obey him in that regard, but she's the one that's getting the brunt of it and facing this judgment by the king, by his counselors, that she is being removed from this position as queen. She cannot come before the king ever again, and she's being removed from that position as queen, and another is going to take her place. Now, again, Vashti's getting the raw end of the deal here and what's happening, but it is this very scenario that will bring Esther to the forefront, and how this story is, this work here, even from chapter 1, is going to be used to protect the children of Israel. And so Vashti is getting treated horribly here by the king. But we see another thing, another part of this that is important. And we see this throughout not only the Mede-Persian Empire, we also saw it in regards to the Babylonian Empire. And it was a very essential part. We saw it in the book of Daniel in regards to the commandments that took place there by Nebuchadnezzar. We see it here with the Medes and the Persians. We saw it as well with the Medes and the Persians in the book of Daniel as well. The law of the king, once it was signed, it could not be changed. It could not be changed. There had to be another law to circumvent that law. He could do that, but there was that once that law was put into place, it could not be changed. So that's a bad deal when you have a drunken king. That's a bad deal when you have a drunken king, that he can make a law that that law is there. It cannot be changed. That's very important point to this, because this will come into play in this book here concerning the children of Israel. These laws that are signed by the king that cannot be changed. And so this is what Memucan proposes to the king, that the king would sign such a law and remove Vashti from queen, and another be given her royal estate, one that was better than her, is said. And when, verse 20, and when the king's decree, which he shall make, shall be published throughout all his empire, for it is great, all the wives shall give to their husbands honor, both to great and small. He said, we're going to strike fear in the heart of those wives by making this commandment. They're not going to dare rebel against us. When the king comes down so harsh on the queen, there's no way our wives are going to rebel against us. So it's still a self-preservation here as far as Memucan was concerned, to keep the wives in check. And the saying at verse 21 pleased the king and the princes, and the king did according to the word of Memucan. And he sent letters unto all the king's provinces, and to every province according to the writing thereof, and to every people after their language, that every man should bear rule in his own house, and that it should be published according to the language of every people. And so Ahasuerus made it law. After his drunkenness and anger subsided, I'd venture to say he made such a law with that same instruction there, as it was already declared by Memucan, that one that could not be changed. Could not be changed. Once it was signed by the king, it could not be changed. Again, that's going to be pivotal when we get into the story of Esther as this book goes on, because it will be a similar law that's going to have to be subverted. It's going to have to be in some way dealt with, because of the danger that it proposed for the children of Israel. And yet, it is in these this absolute rule of this king over this kingdom that such devices take place at the whim of this king, as he would, in his drunken state, propose to make laws as this um, to get rid of his wife, to get rid of the queen, in order that he might preserve, as Memucan was saying, to preserve the peace of the homes of Persia, so that to keep the wives in check so they wouldn't go wild because of Vashti's disobedience. But this Vashti is removed as queen, and now King Ahasuerus will be looking for another queen. And this is where Esther comes into place. When we get into chapter number 2, we see how this is, we begin to see in that the Lord's providence unfolding there, and how he's bringing this to pass for the protection of the children of Israel. Esther doesn't see that. Her cousin, uncle, whatever Mordecai is, I always get confused in the reading how that's read there. But Mordecai, he didn't know how all of that was going to come out. But we see there in him at least faith. For such a time as this, he would make the statement. How do we know that for such a time as this, that she was put in that place for that purpose. And so we see there at least a glimmer of faith there in regards to what the Lord has accomplished or what the Lord is providing here among the children of Israel, even in this state still of captivity under the rulership of the Persian Empire at this time. But Vashti is put out as queen. Ahasuerus, of course, continues to be king, and he is looking now, when we get to chapter 2, he is looking for another queen. And this is where our um, Esther comes on the scene here in chapter 2 when she is brought into the king's house. And Lord willing, we'll look at this next time when we have opportunity to look at the book of Esther. We'll look here at Esther becoming queen over this kingdom of the Medes and the Persians. We start to see then the Lord's provision in this as he protects the children of Israel through this great trial that is coming their way. All right. Let's go to the Lord in a word of prayer.